All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Hopefully you either heard about this word of mouth or through some of our next door Facebook posts and whatnot. So the real primary purpose today was to continue discussing what I'm calling traffic calming concepts for El Camino, but also saw it as an opportunity just to provide some additional outreach to the neighborhood about some of the larger projects that we have planned. We do have a sewer project upcoming this spring, summer, and then that will be followed the following year by this roadway resurfacing project, which will also include these potential concepts and some other pedestrian and roadway improvements. So I figured since we have a small group, I thought it might be helpful just to everyone go around and just quick introduction, and maybe also say if you're here specifically for the traffic calming or also wanted to hear more about one of the other aspects. But I'll go ahead first, and RJ Suko, Director of Public Works for the town of Corte Madera. And then maybe I'll just go on my screen and call on each one of you. You can say a little bit, but Fred Casisa, our council member.
Yeah, Fred Casisa, council member.
and on my screen,
I live on Granada, Lower Granada 18.
And next one on my screen is Susan.
Susan Sullivan. I'm on El Camino. I'm one of the instigators of let's try to improve this street. I've got my two granddaughters. I'm homeschooling a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. And so when they're out on their bikes, we're always, really nervous about cars coming around the corner. So I'm so excited to see the plans.
Great. David Parisi.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Parisi. Lived in Marin for almost 25 years, and I'm a traffic engineer. I run the County Safe Routes to School program, and I'm a consultant, and RJ asked me to take a look at the street and come up with some ideas, and after I observed the behaviors of people. So that's why I'm here today.
Emily.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Charlie. I live with my little one, my kindergartner, on El Camino. I am guilty of putting out one of those little obnoxious orange men to slow people down. Tip to everybody on this call, it's full of cement. Not messing around.
That'll work.
So I'm really, really happy about this and appreciative of RJ's efforts, and then everybody else that's involved. You too, Fred. Thanks.
Is that traffic mitigation versus traffic calming?
It's traffic instigation, actually. What I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing.
All right. Renee.
Hi, I'm Renee Hassel, and I live on El Camino. I also have small children that are now a little bit bigger. Emily, I appreciate what you say. I used to have Mr. Man out there, as I called him, and I can't tell you how many times he'd been upended. Yeah, just literally wiped out.
Come to me for your concrete.
Yeah, I love that idea. I did not get that smart. I've also had my car door completely, hit and almost yanked off the car, getting in and out of my car. So, I see it first, front and center. I also have a little bit of history. I used to live in Colorado, and I worked for the local government there, and I was in the Public Works Department, office manager. I ran my own department as well as managed 8 of those departments. So I'm very familiar with traffic calming and those types of things. So I thought I'd be maybe valuable.
Awesome. Excellent. Shiva.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shiva Johnson. My husband, Mike, and I also live on El Camino. We have 2 little ones, a 3-year-old and an 8-month-old. And so we are particularly interested in learning more about the traffic calming measures, and Emily and others who have your little orange men out, we are so appreciative, because we have noticed definitely that people, they slow down for those, even if they're kind of far out into the street, it really helps. So thank you.
Brian.
I live on El Camino next to Renee. Been here a long time. Yeah, there's a lot more traffic. Especially around drop-off time and pickup time for the kids at the end of the block, which is all good. We knew that when we bought our houses. I've had a tail light and a rear view mirror taken off. So I would appreciate it if people didn't look at their phones when they're driving down the street, but we can't stop that. And I'm also intensely interested as to whether or not the sewage work is also going to fix the drainage for the street in terms of rainwater, since I've had a lake every winter in front of my house since '93. And my
real quick-
neighbors leave little toy boats floating in it every once in a while.
Yeah,
real
that
quick,
lake-
your
That
address,
lake
if you
comes
don't
into
mind.
the front of my house as well.
Nick, could I get your address just so we can check on that? We are looking at drainage, but if I have a location, that always helps.
Are we talking about Brian? It's
Oh,
33 El
Brian,
Camino.
sorry, I jumped ahead. Yeah,
30
sorry.
33 El Camino Drive. I'm the low spot on the street. It hits Renee's house, who's right next door to me, as
29.
well as
Yeah, we're
as
looking
well
at
as
that
the
one.
other
Wait,
folks.
We have that one being reviewed by a design consultant. Okay, Nicholas.
Hey, I'm Nick Lockwood. I live at 21 Endeavor Cove up the hill. So I'm just more interested in the sewer project and the repaving. Thank you.
Tom.
Oh, hello. Yeah, I have a son at 29 El Camino, Renee's ex-husband. And yeah, I got my door hit one day by someone speeding down the road. And yeah, it would be great to slow everybody down. Thanks.
Barbara.
I live at 57 Paloma Drive. I'm in the neighborhood. It's the main way through the neighborhood, and I care about my neighbors and the safety. And I've been there a long time watching people speed around. So it'd be just great to see that that improves.
Julie.
Hi, I live at 18 El Camino, and I have 2 young kids and a dog, and just constantly concerned with the speeding. It amazes me every day. And we have those little green men out there with the slow down signs, and people just whiz right by. So I'm definitely very interested in this, and improving conditions.
Mary.
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Great. Hi, welcome. My name is Mary Kaiser. I actually live in the neighborhood next door, Madera del Presidio, Phase 2. And I often walk from my neighborhood over to yours, and am just shocked at how different the traffic patterns are from walking from my neighborhood over to yours. So I'm here to help advocate on the east side with traffic.
Okay. Richard.
Sorry, I was muted. I am just on listening as a matter of keeping informed with what's going on in the neighborhood. I live further up Granada on Vista Court, so I'll just be listening in.
Great. Okay. Why don't I quickly just spend less than a minute just giving a quick overview of the sewer project, so we can kind of focus on traffic calming. So I'm going to share screen here. So just real high level, this is the project limits or the streets that are included in the project. So the whole lower portion of, Granada, Paloma, El Camino, all the way up the hill, and also including Endeavor Drive and Sonora and Vista Court. And so we'll be looking at really any deficient sewer mains as part of that project. A large percentage of those will get replaced with new pipelines. As part of that work, each home ties in what we call a private sewer lateral to that sewer main. And we kind of delineate that into 2 pieces. One we call the lower lateral, one we call the upper. And generally that delineation is near the property line or the back of sidewalk, if there is sidewalk. And so as part of the project and through a pilot grant program, the sewer district, which is also managed by the town, would come in, do that lower portion of the private sewer lateral, and would manage that process, pay for the work. And then the upper portion, you will get notified toward the end of the project, so closer to the end of this year, and it'll say, hey, you've got 6 months to hire another contractor to do the last bit, which is primarily on your property. And we'll also assist with providing a list of contractors that have been pre-qualified, and we'll also try to get some preliminary pricing that you can review and kind of use as part of your decision-making process. So that's really the first project step that's coming up pretty soon. And then the year following is when we will come in, do, and similar streets, we'll do any other ADA curb ramp improvements, any of these traffic calming improvements, and then also we'll do some sort of resurfacing on the road before we complete that project.
Hey, RJ.
Yeah.
Just clarify on the laterals, on the private laterals from the house to the street. So somebody comes in, they essentially scope it out, right, to see if it needs to be replaced or not. And if it does need to be replaced, then that's at the cost of the homeowner, correct?
Yeah. So yeah, anyone who's done this work in the last, forget exactly how many years, you don't have to do it twice. And even if your pipe was done many years before, and if it can pass a pressure test, you're also good. But if it is deficient and does not pass a pressure test, then you will be triggered to upgrade your private sewer lateral. Typically, that would be completely on your dime, but we have these grant programs that are going to assist with that. And for this particular project, you'll get the lower lateral paid for by the district as part of that grant program. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify for everybody.
So
Okay.
a year ago, we had to pay the big bucks to have the whole thing done with, and so it's brand new, but we had to pay the whole thing. There's no rebate for us.
The program was approved. There are certain elements, but it was not retroactive. So it's since that was done.
When was that done?
So we added a loan program back in fall, and then prior to that, it was I believe May of, I want to say 2019. I can get an answer for you,
Well,
Susan.
we did it in 2020.
Okay.
And nobody told us there was any grant money.
If you don't mind, I know you have my email. Just
Okay.
send me the dates and I'll look into it for you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then I see about half of the folks weren't here for when we met in October, which is totally fine. So this was initiated by request from the neighbors to look at the traffic speeds. A handful of us met in October along with Central Maine Police Department to kind of discuss the results of that speed survey. We have 2 sets of speed data that use kind of what we call the 85th percentile speed, which is just kind of what they use to look at, excuse me, sorry about that. To look at how the speeds are relative to the speed limit and whether it kind of gives you a sense of how urgent the matter is. So it didn't show necessarily widespread speeding, given 23, 24 miles an hour. And then one of the other studies was 28, although there were some blips of definitely people that were excessively speeding. Central Maine Police did speak to that. They spent some time out in the neighborhood around October. You probably saw them, and they commented on that. Don't want to, I can get into that. We can speak about it further, but really I wanted to more showcase the good work that Parisi Consultants has prepared since then in response. In summary, you know, we're planning to do everything we can to calm speeds regardless. And luckily we have this project, you know, in summer 2022 where we can implement those measures and really do what we can to reduce the speeds, irregardless of really what they were before. So with that, maybe I'll jump into the concepts and then we can answer questions and get into any of the data or any of the standards that apply to these concepts. So David, you want to take it away, and do you have ability to share screen, or do you need me to show your exhibits?
Yes, RJ, no problem. I can share the screen. And first off, I'll confirm that everybody can see what I have put up on the screen. Great, I see a thumbs up from Susan. So as I mentioned, I'm a traffic engineer. We have a firm of transportation planners and traffic engineers. And actually this is our forte, is to look at streets and see what traffic control devices make sense. What are some means to slow down traffic? As RJ mentioned, the speeds of traffic are going around the speed limit of 25 miles an hour. But as we know, on a local street, even though that's allowed in California and it's legal, it seems pretty high for some prevailing traffic that's coming around, particularly those folks that really exceed it. And so our goal on traffic calming programs is often to just try to reduce the number of outliers, those folks that are really going 30, 40 miles an hour down the street, but also get other drivers to behave better too, and bring speeds down, and have drivers be able to recognize that there's cyclists and pedestrians and people crossing the street and folks living along the street as well. How we usually start our work is by just doing an inventory of existing conditions. And the first two sheets that I'm going to show you have a lot of codes in here. And all those are is what kind of details are on the street for striping and for signs and things like that. For instance, we know that El Camino from Paradise up to Estrada has a center line on it. It has some red curb areas. But then when you go to the south of that, along El Camino, there is no center line. The street itself is about 34 feet wide. It's a straightaway, and it's used to get up the hill and to and from some other homes. Coming around the curve by the preschool, there's a center line and some curb that's been painted there, and then what we call an all-way stop sign at Granada. Going back to this three-legged intersection of El Camino and Estrada, it's a little awkward having these three legs at these angles as they are, with one being stop sign controlled, one approach having a yield sign and marking on it, and the other having no controls at all. It's very unique, and based on our observations, I think it throws some people for a loop, or others don't really feel they need to stop completely at the stop sign, and people do go through the curve at a pretty good pace. There's also now a crosswalk across El Camino there, and I don't know about you, but I have heard for years when we've done some walk audits for Safe Routes to School that there's a desire to provide a marked crossing in an area such as that. So the next sheets that we have developed here, and I'm moving right to the sheet 3, are some of the recommendations that we want to discuss with you and see if they feel right, and see if you have any questions about them. As RJ mentioned, the town is going to be repaving the roads, so it's a perfect opportunity to make some modest changes to the street, particularly to achieve some of the objectives that the neighborhood has. We are showing just some of that red curb paint. It's not red any longer. It's a light pink, or it's really lost its luster. And so we saw that, and we thought that might be a good thing to kind of upgrade that a little bit. Certainly, we don't want cars parking where they limit sight distance to crosswalks or to driveways and things such as that. I will get to the intersection of Estrada El Camino because we're going to show a couple options. So I'll get to that momentarily. But heading south on El Camino, as I mentioned, it's about 34 feet wide. And some people do feel compelled to go a little fast there. The curbs are rolled. Some people park on the sidewalks just because there are no markings out there. So what we're actually recommending on this stretch is to put in some white edge lines for most of the distance on the straightaway to really define the two-way travel zone for cars. We're not advocating for a yellow center line because in our experience and what we've seen all over the places, when you put yellow center lines, it really defines the lanes for people and encourages, can encourage faster speeds. But we think a couple edge lines 8 feet away from the curbs would achieve a couple objectives. They could provide a parking zone, encourage people not to park on the sidewalk as well, because there's plenty of space. The average car is only 6.5 feet wide. And it would provide an 18-foot wide two-way travel way, which give the perception, if it's marked on the edges, it'll give the perception to drivers that it's narrower than it is today, which will encourage slower speeds, particularly when, not only when there's just one car on the road going one direction, but when there's two vehicles going in opposite directions. And then around the curve, we noticed that some of the red curb striping ends prematurely, in my opinion, on the inside of the curve. So if folks be whipping around, there could be a parked car at that location, and there's some old paint just on the other side by the preschool that also could be refreshed. But the highlight along the stretch of El Camino, we think it would be very helpful. Go ahead, RJ.
Yeah, and so a lot of the kind of observations you may all be seeing with the kind of children at play markers. I know there were some comments earlier about, traffic speeds were down because there were more cars parked on the edges during shelter in place, or whether it was there was some small construction projects in the area that also had the similar effect. I mean, really that is a lot of the reductions in speed that you're going to see, except for now you're going to see it hopefully throughout the entire El Camino corridor.
Yeah, we've done this on other streets, and we've seen on average 2 to 3 mile an hour reductions in the average speed. And while that is detectable, and you would notice a difference, in my opinion, the biggest difference will be in the folks that are just really going fast. And that's what drives this 85th percentile speed up that RJ was talking about. So, and probably the drivers you notice the most are the folks coming through there, at 30, 35, 40 miles an hour. We then
the ones going 50.
Or 50, yeah, exactly. Right, and that's where the concrete man helps or hurts. Anyway, we also took a look at the intersection of Camino and Estrada, and we came up with a couple different ideas here. First off, as I mentioned before, the traffic control is really unique, and in my opinion, a little confusing by having a stop sign, a yield, and then nothing. It's like a mixture of all three at this very oblique intersection. We looked at what the codes are and the requirements to make an intersection all-way stop control. That means putting a stop sign on all three legs. And this would not meet it. The traffic numbers are too low, and some of the right-of-way issues would not require that. So we're actually advocating to put a stop sign on Estrada as the opposite leg coming into the intersection, but having El Camino have no stop signs, but a crosswalk across it and some traffic calming measures to really slow down traffic through the corner. And we have two ideas. The first idea we call option A, and we're calling it the concrete bulb out option. And what bulb outs are is extensions of the sidewalk about 6 feet, up to 6 feet into the intersection. They serve a lot of purposes. They really reduce the length of a crosswalk. They slow down right turns. They slow down left turns. And they really improve the sight distance between pedestrians and motorists as well. And throughout the whole intersection, it would really slow down traffic coming through El Camino. As you can see from Estrada's perspective, a motorist here, it would actually move the stop line up and there be better sight lines for this motorist to look in either direction. This is not a cheap alternative because anytime you move the curbs, you often have to deal with the drainage and sometimes drainage inlets. We haven't studied that yet, but these are not inexpensive, but they are highly effective types of traffic calming treatments. So we wanted to show this. We do advocate for the approaches to put the center line back in to define for the drivers as they're coming into the intersection. And I should mention for option A and the option B that I'm going to talk about momentarily, we're proposing an edge line also 100 feet or more on the west side of El Camino toward Paradise Drive to define that zone a bit. It's not going to take parking away. Actually, it'll define the parking zone, but it'll keep folks out of a big wide lane and encourage slower speeds. I will say that we would want to put up red curb paint, you know, starting at about this driveway here through the bulb. Of course, we don't have anybody parking in the middle of the intersection anyway, and back around for really just for sight distance purposes. So the motorists can see any pedestrian that may be standing here as they're coming around a curve. So that's what we're looking at with that option. We also developed a second option.
Can I just interject a quick question just for context?
Yes.
I can appreciate very much that drainage adds a large unknown and cost here, but I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's 20,000 or 220,000 or you know, do you mind? Right. And no one's holding you to it, but just to sort of give an idea, because funds aren't unlimited, you know, it's public entity.
I'm happy to answer that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, I think given the importance of this corridor, I think from the town's perspective, we want the best quality product. And I think, you know, David's just bringing a light, you know, he doesn't necessarily know all the budgets, but yeah, I would say there's a cost difference of probably $20,000 to $30,000, maybe closer on the high side there between the two options.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I should offer one other thing about option A, and it looks like Renee has her hand up. We're also showing new curb ramps, and these are new curb ramps that would need to be built in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Awesome. So that'd be part of any plan. Before I move on, I'm happy to answer any of the questions. I think Renee had a hand up and Susan. Yeah.
It looks like you're adding a yield sign going out of on El Camino going towards Paradise Drive.
Yeah, these would be shark's teeth, or what are called yield lines, and these are for the crosswalk. So you've seen these before. Maybe you're seeing more and more of these. They're pretty effective. They're telling the motorist, hey, there could be a pedestrian crossing here. If there is, yield to them, because there'd also be a sign that says yield here to pedestrian. And we need to put those at least 20 feet ahead of an uncontrolled crosswalk. And I should mention also, you know, if this crosswalk gets a lot of use over time, this could be a candidate for one of those rectangular rapid flashing beacon lights, where when somebody pushes a button, you get the flashing going on. But usually we don't put those in right away. We want to take a look and make sure we could if we needed to, but we want to see what the usage is at that location. Okay, Renee had a hand up.
Yeah, my concern is the same thing that Susie just kind of talked about, not putting some sort of stop at that intersection there. They've already had a really long run at going fast and straight. And this is, if we're adding crosswalks and kids crossing, I mean, right now, my kid has a hard time crossing that street. I actually tell him to do it closer to the middle where I live, rather than doing it near the intersection, because it, you know, and if they have no reason to stop there, you know, currently we have the stop coming off of Paradise on El Camino. I'd rather see it flipped around to the other side so they know they have to slow down as they approach that intersection. I know that's 2 stop signs, and in both this A and B option, you've only proposed 1 stop sign on Estrada, which currently has the free flow. But I would love to see a stop on that runway, because you cannot get the speed going from the light to this corner that they need, even though, you know, they're going to keep moving on that as well. But you know, and the kids have a hard time crossing this intersection. I will say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially with where they place the cross guard, right? So the cross guard is on, as you're going out of the neighborhood on the right hand side. They've got to get to that side so they can cross Paradise safely. So they do have to, everybody has to cross this intersection at some point.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I-
Yeah, I will say that the intent here, because an all-way stop isn't warranted, we wanted to look at what can we do to slow down speeds on El Camino. And believe me, I witnessed it too. And the intent on both options is to really tighten up the curve geometrically with curbs, either on the side of the street or in the middle of the street, and add striping as well. So we definitely would be slowing traffic down. And you know, I don't know, RJ, that's something we'd want to take a look at if there's a pedestrian crosswalk here, is, you know, when and if flashing beacon will be warranted, you know, for additional warning.
Yeah. So, you know, David's touched on it, and hopefully people are seeing some of the advantage, just the shorter distance, right? With the bulb out option, you're coming 6 feet closer, but also imagine a person now standing kind of on a raised island closer in the roadway, yet on an elevated sidewalk. Mm-hmm. So that visibility is much improved. On option B, you actually have kind of this refuge in the middle as well. So, you know, you could in some ways cross it in halves or cross it all at once is kind of one of the benefits there. I'm happy at, you know, if we need to kind of dive a little bit into the standards and talk a little bit about that. It's not about purchasing a sign. There's also some downsides with creating confusion, and also when people tend to come to stop signs and never see other cars, they start to run those, and that causes other safety issues. So we can get into that if we need to, but yeah, it's not just about the cost of the sign and those sorts of things.
Tom has his hand up, and I'm wondering though if I should go through option B real quick. And
yeah,
then...
let's do that.
Well, can I just make a quick comment though? I am a big proponent of the chicane calming, which is more of the option B. I mean, A has some chicane calming, which is where you actually, you know, widen the road or shorten the road. And I think that's the effect that we're getting out of the Mr. Mans that are placed in the street. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I'd be curious to see if we've looked at and endorsed or even studied doing that halfway down the runway of El Camino.
You mean moving the traffic kind of back and forth?
Yeah, you know, moving that throughout the runway.
So we've done that in a few places, like in San Anselmo, where we have narrower lanes, and we've done it by having parking on one side and then the other side and then the other side. This street is 34 feet wide, and I think there's parking demand on both sides of the road. We did not look at the possibility of removing parking or prohibiting parking along long stretches of El Camino, which I think would be required to do some chicaning on this street. We thought that'd probably be opposed by most neighbors, but it could be part of the picture if folks were, you know, willing to lose a lot of parking along the street, because that's what happens. On the examples I gave you in San Anselmo, they already have parking either on one side of the street or the other. And so we just reallocated it to one side, then the other, then one side, then the other, to create a meandering effect and slow down traffic.
Yeah, because the problem with our parking, and that's why residents are parking on the sidewalks, is because we're getting our mirrors and our doors knocked off. So people are pulling onto the sidewalk, which is, you know, having the parking all over is a good thing in and of itself, but having it maybe more delineated with chicane parking might help.
Yeah, and I think when people are parking on the sidewalks, you're protecting your car, but you're inadvertently opening up the travel lanes for higher speeds on the street. And right now there's no markings on the street, again, as you go to the south. So it looks like a drag strip, right? And if people are parking further away, it's a wide open roadway. I think Tom's had his hand up for a bit.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Tom Knopfsiger, and I'm actually on the BPAC for like the last 4 or 5 years as well for Corte Madera. Hello, RJ. You know, I guess, you know, first and foremost, this is a neighborhood, right? And I don't know why we wouldn't look at a three-way stop on this. I know I heard it mentioned that there wasn't enough traffic, but this is a neighborhood first and foremost, and people should stop and drive slowly. And it seems like stop signs at all three of, these roadways going in this intersection would be smart. That slows people down, a stop sign. So anyway, that's my thought on it.
And this is difficult. This comes up all the time in our work. So stop signs and always stops are really meant for traffic, for right-of-way control, like who has the right-of-way, and when traffic volumes are pretty equal. We actually have to follow the guidelines in this state manual called the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is based on years and years of research. And there is a section in there about when it makes sense to do what's called an always stop sign control. And under that case, you do want pretty equal traffic volumes, but you also want volumes that are high enough, believe it or not, that people will have an incentive to stop because there's opposing traffic. As RJ mentioned before, with the traffic numbers on at this intersection, with this always stop control, it would not meet the metrics or be what's called warranted in the guidelines, which would create some liability for the town. But even more so, the reason it's not warranted is most likely we definitely have people running through stop signs, not respecting it because they wouldn't have opposing traffic during good parts of the day. So it's frustrating. It seems counterintuitive, but it's been based on a lot of research, and it's one of the things that the town has to rely on when putting in traffic control measures. So what we're trying to do here is something that can achieve a lot of objectives: slowing traffic, reducing the crossing width for pedestrians, making things a little bit make more sense for all the users as well, and provide some options for the future, including, for instance, maybe putting up a flashing beacon. RJ, anything you want to offer to that? You have a lot of history in traffic as well.
So I did actually share that section in the October meeting, and
okay.
So I'm happy to share it again now. I can share my screen here.
Before you do, let me just quickly go over B, since we just have gone through it. Yep. So B, option B, instead of going out to in, kind of goes into out by providing some raised median islands along El Camino. And this would, again, not provide curb bulbs on the edges, but provide raised islands in the middle of the street. They could have decorative, markings inside of them, stamped concrete, something like that. All the other controls would be the same as we've shown before, with new, yield lines, a new crosswalk, also enhanced crosswalk across Estrada. This crosswalk would not be as far up as the crosswalk would be in option A with the curb bulbs, obviously, because there wouldn't be any bulbs pushing it up. We would need to redesign the ramps, the curb ramps out here, using a different style of ramp at each of the 4 locations, but they would be compliant with Americans with Disabilities Act. In this case, I think the curve would be a little, would not be as tight coming through for traffic in this direction as it would be under option A by just a bit in its radius. We would do a little bit of striping to encourage the drivers, southbound, to stay tight toward the center line. The crosswalk would be longer in option B across El Camino as compared to option A by about 12 feet longer, but there'd be a little area in the middle where you potentially could seek refuge if you're a pedestrian and do a 2-stage crossing. There isn't enough room to put another little island here because of the angle of the streets, and often we'll do that. We'll put another island here so there actually is a bona fide refuge area. And the reason there isn't is because this left turn needs some good room for the vehicle to make that turning maneuver. Drainage wise, the reason why this would be a little bit less than option A is because there really wouldn't be any drainage impacts we wouldn't be pushing curbs out into the street and have to deal with the crown of the roadway. So there you go. So I'm turning it back to RJ. You think you wanted to share some other information?
Yeah.
Hey, RJ, I have a quick question if I can.
Sure.
Can you let us know how long, I want to say that crosswalk, well, there's no crosswalk now, how long the differences between the two crosswalks lengthwise? And do you know about what it would be now, plus or minus? Just to kind of put it in perspective.
Yes, so I can tell you, it's 38 feet. This part of El Camino is a little wider. It's 38 feet. Okay, then up here is 34. So this crosswalk would be about 38 minus 12, or about 26 feet long. Okay. This would be 26 feet and this would be 38 feet.
Sorry, I think I stole your screen, but so the current was what, David?
38.
Okay, and then we're reducing it by 12, correct?
Correct. This would reduce it by about 12 feet.
RJ, if we know that stop signs, a three-way stop is off the table, do you mind you flashed up the code? We can, if folks that are still interested in that maybe can look at that, because I think it would be really helpful if we talked about the two options that have been proposed rather than what we know we can't do or won't do.
Yeah, what I would, I was hoping, I did want to spend a little bit on this just because, again, it's a counterintuitive concept.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather see us implement something that's standard. And then if we see things that, behaviorally that aren't, are concerning, we can then make the warrants for a stop sign later. So that would be my kind of phased approach. But, it really talks about several factors. So just on the single stop sign application, it's asking for 6,000 vehicles a day. Here we have about 700 or 800 vehicles a day. View exists that requires road users to stop in order to adequately observe conflicting traffic. 3 or more crashes within a 12-month period. And then moving down to the multi-way stop, 5 or more reported crashes in a 12-month period. Talks about 300 cars per hour over an 8-hour period. Some further, more detailed items related to number of vehicles, and then again, 85th percentile exceeding 40 miles an hour. So that's the standard. That's where we have to start as engineers and kind of work out from. So as David mentioned, we need a basis to really go against that. And right now, it's hard to make that basis. Should implementation occur and we see something different, then that's a different story. So I don't know if anyone has any questions on this particular code.
I have a question about something different. David, I think this question is probably more for you, and I apologize. I was not involved back in October. I didn't participate in the last meeting, but have you all considered speed bumps on this street?
RJ, I'm going to turn back to you because I think the town has a policy in that regard.
So speed bumps, obviously they do tend to cause people to slow. They do have several negative effects that people don't necessarily recognize at the beginning, and that they make a lot of noise for those property owners that are right there. So sometimes it's, yes, I would, common thing for the neighborhood is, yeah, I'd like them, but just not in front of my house. And then who's getting that and getting the bump, loud every night in front of their house as they try to sleep. We also really don't have a precedence for them in town. I don't think they're the best solution. I like what David's come up with. These traffic calming measures much better. The other thing is, if we were to consider speed humps, just going off of some of the other agency policies in Marin, they usually would only consider them when the speed is above the 85th percentile is above 30 miles an hour. And so we're not checking that box.
And the reason for that is you can actually go over most speed humps very comfortably at 25 miles an hour. So they're really designed for reducing speeds that are higher than that. And a couple other things, they were really a good first generation traffic calming tool, but paramedics and first responders really don't like them. For paramedics and ambulances have very expensive equipment in the back of a car, of a vehicle with a potential patient in there. So those type of vertical deflection devices are, in our world, we're kind of going away from them now and doing things that either push the road in or push it out a little bit more.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you.
And also, I'm in the middle of the block, and I sit on my front porch and watch the traffic, and we have a lot of fire trucks, ambulances, huge grocery trucks like Safeway, and all the delivery trucks.
Amazon trucks.
That would be beating the heck out of my house every day, all day long. And I would not prefer that at all. And I really don't want to slow the police and the fire and the ambulances down either. When they put their sirens on and they want to go fast, they need to go fast. So I like what I see in the plans that we have here.
So I have a quick question too on, I guess, the two scenarios. The crosswalk that goes across El Camino, did you guys look at whether it should be on the Paradise side of that intersection or whether it should be on the Granada side of that intersection? On one hand, it seems to me that if the crosswalk to go across El Camino was on the other side of that intersection, so on the right-hand side, that might be less blind because the speed where people are coming is from the Granada side, not from the short run from the Paradise side.
I'd love to get everyone else's feedback on that. To be honest, we were really debating that internally, like what side does it make sense? When we were out in the field, we saw lots of folks on the north side of Estrada coming down the street, and just looking at the kind of the travel bases, travel sheds, we were speculating that the best spot would be on the Paradise side. But I'd love to hear if there's some of their feedback. I don't think it matters that much. We could make it work sight distance wise on either side. But you guys have more experience day to day than I do.
I agree.
And have to have a stop sign at the location that you've said doesn't make sense right now. I guess maybe you can have a sidewalk without a stop sign, but is that what you would need to do?
I don't understand. Can you repeat that?
Sorry, David. Are we debating? You see where the hand is on yours?
Oh, we're debating should the crosswalk be on this side or on this side?
Yeah, and if it was on the latter of those two options, wouldn't then you want to put a stop sign where to be coupled with a crosswalk? Or
no, because that's the same thing here. And over here, we're also showing it as yield controlled from both directions. So.
Oh, it's not a stop sign where there is one right now. You're talking about removing it.
That's correct.
Got it. Okay, I had missed that.
Converting the yield to a stop and then slowing down the northbound movement through the traffic calming, but the southbound removing the stop.
So you guys said no three-way stops. Do we only have one stop sign in this legal
Correct.
Scenario?
Yeah, that's what we're recommending.
Can we have two?
No, they're only letting us do one because they're stealing one. There's only one that's going to be on there is the one at the bottom.
Yeah. So
Which,
I would agree with Tom moving the proposed crosswalk because the pedestrian has a better eyesight view of both sides from
Right.
that side.
From over here.
They'll be able to see the shorter, slower traffic coming from Paradise and make their decision, but they'll also be able to have a longer look down the runway and say, that guy's flying, I can't go.
And one other attribute would be, if there's a pedestrian where the hand is here, he or she's looking to the south. With a bulb out, you'd be able to see clearer down the street rather than
Right.
here if there's parked cars.
Yep.
Right. So, okay.
Yeah, it's something to consider because I do think the pedestrian will have better sight line if it's on the Granada side of that intersection, meaning the right-hand side versus the left-hand side,
Okay.
I guess.
And then also, just since we're on the topic, imagine no cars anywhere to be found. Where do people typically want to cross just because of the shortest route or convenience?
I'm having my kid typically cross in the middle of the El Camino because I don't want him anywhere near that intersection.
Yep, me too.
And that's where you have sight lines. If you're crossing in front of Susie and Renee's house, that's where you can see both ways.
Yep.
Well, I would say the one where the island is, where they're proposing to put it further down on El Camino, but at the corner, because it's used by the people in the neighborhood. So they're going from one part of the neighborhood to another. They're not, so that's a shorter spot. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. You're saying here.
Yeah,
Or here.
because why go further and then cross, and you have to cross two corners? Otherwise, I mean, the way I go, I just would cross one street.
True. So if you're coming down the street, and most folks.
No, I'm on the other side.
You're on this side, okay.
Yeah. And so then I could just go right across. Boom.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And most folks that are walking down to Paradise, we saw many on this side. There's that park, right? And Cove Schools, that's the direction you would go, right?
In the cross.
Yeah.
Well, that's certainly the way the kids need to go. They need to be on that side because that's where the crossing guard is.
Hey, I have a quick question. So if we did put it on that one side there where your arrows are, is there enough traffic calming coming down El Camino where people are going to be slowing down going in towards that crosswalk? Or is it one of these things where they're just going to keep on speeding? Because it seems like if you have the bump out after that, it's after the fact.
Yeah, but at least if you're the pedestrian, if you're the pedestrian, you're going to, because it's a small enough intersection, you're not going to cross if someone's coming down the street. And I just think you have a better vantage point as a pedestrian on either side of the street if you want to cross on this the new side, the new way, or the non-proposed side, or option C.
Yeah, and keep in mind, these are just drawings, right?
Sure.
What we would do next is based on your input, is if it made sense to do this, is maybe we reconfigure this curve a little bit more, as much as practical, to really force a turn through here, or a slower right turn, right? Because I am, this is a straight movement, right? As you guys, they're coming in.
Yeah, but that's why I like the islands.
You like the islands, okay.
I personally like the islands just because, that's where they should slow down as opposed to constricting the entire thing and having two cars converge on each other.
And then just real quick to touch on Councilmember Casisa's comment. So it's not shown in these visuals, but we will have that edge line that brings it tighter in both scenarios. So that will slow people down, bring them toward the center, and give them a better sight distance than what you see now.
To the south.
Okay.
Yeah, the raised median would be good because you guys could put some signage on there too. So it seems like that would at least let the motorists know that. I mean, can the pedestrian go over top of it, or that doesn't get ADA compliant, I guess?
We're not going to put any barbed wire up, so if pedestrian chose to do that, they could.
Yeah.
But
So,
yeah,
I mean, to that point, it could be integrated, but the crosswalk would be sliding probably into, we probably wouldn't move the location of what you're seeing right now, but the crosswalk would move into it. And then the only downside is you're just pulling the crosswalk further away from the intersection, I think.
So an example of
Oh,
these would be, there was 4 or 5 sets of these that were recently installed on South Alicio Drive in Larkspur, which is a curvilinear road with the same purpose, to slow down traffic and provide pedestrian crosswalks.
We walk over there a lot, and it seems like it's pretty effective because I've seen people slow down because they're either paranoid they're going to hit the center cement divide or they're going to hit a parked car because of the white line. And I think Julie may have had a question. I didn't mean to cut her off.
Oh, no, that's okay. Yeah, thank you. This might, forgive me if we're actually about to talk about this, but I'm just confirming because I think this was mentioned before. I mean, I think all of the traffic calming at this intersection is good too, but somehow, like, because now we have a stop sign and people, even if they're making a rolling stop, they're stopping, you know, somewhat they're slowing down, and still somehow by the middle of El Camino, the speed is just right back up again. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand that once we get past this going towards Granada, that the plans we're thinking of are the lines on the sides, and then will you have the middle? You're not doing a middle line, you said, right?
No, I think a middle line would actually increase speeds.
Okay, so we're
separating the travel ways, so it's giving the perception to a driver that they have their own lane.
Right. So just
right?
narrowing the.
Yes, and there's plenty of room within 18 feet for 2 cars to pass each other.
Yeah, because it's like even with that intersection there now, and even with that stop sign, I'm amazed at how quickly people can regain their speed just like a few houses down. It's crazy. So
what's interesting is that I think it was Renee that said something about staggering. If you did do the this option, you would be kind of staggering because the cars are inside, right, with the edge lines, and they got to push out. So it's kind of, you would be doing a little bit of a Wooner effect.
Right. No, I do. I definitely I like option B. Yeah, I just want to make sure that that once we get into the streets, that it's also.
And option B too, if you did move the crosswalk to their side, you might have a little more opportunity to give there may be a little more space because you don't have that same left-hand turn problem potentially, that there may be more space to give the pedestrian safe harbor on the crosswalk as well.
Well, and that's my thought. If we move option B over to the other side, yes, the intersection still stays wide, but we're going to delineate with some lines, and we're not going to have those pop outs, but the pedestrian does have a bailout. So that's a good thing, even though it's a longer 12 feet of cross for them.
Right, but you could do it in 2 stages if you needed to.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So I have a comment and 2 questions, if I might. The first is David and RJ, but if the crosswalk is to be moved to where we suggested, can you tell us which of then the bulb out versus the medium island you think would meet the needs of making this intersection safer best? And I don't know if you can, because you haven't really delved into that yet. Because I have to tell you, I had a strong preference, as did a couple other people on the block with whom I spoke, for the bulb out. And the reason was I was concerned by exactly what one of the neighbors was saying, is people whipping down El Camino towards Paradise, that sort of blind corner. And I thought, from a driver's perspective, having to navigate and go around a bulb out, worst case scenario, has your car angled towards the opposite curb, right? So those people that might be, finishing their cross over to El Camino, they would be missed. Whereas a medium, people hop I don't know how well they're lit. So, but now that we're talking about a scenario where the crosswalk would be further to the right, do you have a recommendation, the bulb out or the medians, like which do you think serves the purpose and is most protective? And then so I can stop talking, you can answer both of those. At the very end, like Julie was talking about, sort of people whipping around, getting all the way to that end, and then there's that long corner. Other than painting it red, was there any possibility of making that an even more annoying corner with a small bulb out or anything else, or is that just not possible?
You mean in combination with option B?
Sorry, say it again.
You mean in combination with option B?
Yeah, so now I've moved away from the A and B option of this intersection, and I'm talking further down the road at El Camino.
Oh, okay.
There's that one curve, and I know that the traffic calming you're suggesting is making that line a deeper red. But I'm also wondering if we can make that a slightly less convenient turn. Just the other day, I was yelling at someone. They actually nearly hit the cat. They just whipped around that corner as if it was a race.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We could look into that, particularly if there's no parking. We could do some stuff with striping.
No parking. Make that just a little
right? To narrow up the
Yeah, David, I'm measuring between 15 and 16 feet wide there.
Yeah, we can definitely stripe out a shoulder. I'm sensitive though in residential neighborhoods about paint and striping. I don't want to go crazy with it. Yeah. But we could come up with something modest. Can you fix that lady's sidewalk
while you're at it?
What's that?
I said, can you fix that lady's sidewalk while you're at it? She's got the worst sidewalk in front of her house ever.
We will look at some of that stuff as part of the project. So, but send me the address.
No, that's a good idea. We can look down there.
About the bulb out.
You know what I want to do is, I came to this meeting kind of thinking option A was more beneficial, just like you did, and then listening to folks and understand the idea about staggering. I don't know if I have a preference right now. What I'd like to do is maybe look at what each of these options would look like with the crosswalk flip-flopped. And then based on your input, see what else we could do to maximize the traffic calming effect through the intersection. So there may be some mixing and matching of some things we may want to try.
If you move that crosswalk, does it change the positioning of those bulb outs? That would be what I would want to see.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah. See, if you look at this bulb out, we can have 2 directional ramps, which is the preferred design nowadays. There's a driveway right here to this house. It may be more challenging to get 2 different directional curb ramps in. We may have to have 1 curb ramp at 45 degrees that we share. I'm not sure. We'll have to look at it. Is it the end of the world? No, but it's not a preferable design. But what I'm hearing, RJ, is some really good input about moving the crosswalk, seeing if we can kind of mix and match some of the components a little bit, particularly to reduce the speed on El Camino through the intersection.
And then I wanted to hear from in particular some of the folks that do live on El Camino. We can consider, and hopefully I'm on the same page on what you mean by the chicane. I mean, I'm thinking like a raised barrier that would kind of take the place of a parking stall, for instance, in a couple strategic locations. We can look at that if, those who live on that street are open to losing a few parking spots.
Yeah, I'm all for that.
Yep. And we don't have enough parking as it is. I mean, I have a book club. Well, someday we'll meet again, but people have to park at the school a lot of times, just because by the time everybody gets their cars in the evening, there's no parking spaces left for if you have a guest.
Yeah.
And if you have, 9 guests, that's 9 cars. It's just ridiculous. So I personally would not want to lose any parking on El Camino.
Yeah, but
I'm so happy to have
my house is also ridiculous.
Yeah,
I mean, we're lucky we have a school, so sending your guests when you have 9 of them rather than parking them in your neighbor's yard is considerate, in my opinion.
I'm hearing a split decision, so at least for a sneak peek, we'll look at that. No.
Where you can see an example of that would be on Molinas Avenue, Officer Francis Drake. It separates Ross and San Anselmo. There's a roadway that we did traffic calming. We put 3 of those islands in the middle of the street, kind of paste them down. They do remove parking near them, and they do create that meandering effect. But
so David, I was almost thinking to avoid, so let's say you have the edge lines, but no cars parked. Some people are ignore the edge line and just go faster like they might now and use the full paved section. I was almost thinking of more of a raised something in that parking stall as opposed to the center. Was my
that'd be pretty cool if you could do that. You know, you could, RJ, do a couple retrofits on either side and even throw landscaping in there if the neighbors would take care of it. You know, something like that. It would be that.
It would be not in the drainage canal though, right?
Yeah, we would.
You could do
to keep it, you know, free flowing.
2 feet away.
Okay.
Yeah.
But kind of you get rid of the cheaters, so to speak, that are flowing over the line. They're not supposed to be going over.
Well, that only potentially torches a couple of spots too.
Yeah, we could look at that.
Hey, I gotta bow out, but last comment, I do live on El Camino. I am the guy with the drainage problem. It sounded like, you know, the savings for, you know, 2 to 3 miles is really focused on sort of the high speeders, bringing that, you know, average down. And I was just throwing out the idea of, you know, it'd be nice to tag some of those high speeders. A lot of times I see it's like a kid zooming up the hill. And you don't necessarily want to open yourself up to, you know, any kind of retaliation. I've lost a couple of mirrors and taillights already. So, you know, I know they have cameras that, you know, can take a picture, you know, if somebody's excessively speeding, say, you know, over 35 or 40 or whatever the answer is. So you can get those really egregious folks that fly up and down the street.
Yeah, so PD was out there in October doing a lot of enforcement and did pull over a handful of people, including one that you may be familiar with that was at the time driving a black or gray Tesla that was a repeat offender. So they did have that conversation. The PD officer did say that they have difficulties enforcing tickets. I think it was below like close to 35 miles an hour. So there's a challenge there, but nonetheless, they were pulled over and given a stern talking to. So
all right. It's all good. I know Fred's got a fun neighbor too.
And I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I mean, I'm happy to stay for a few more minutes, but if there's any burning comments before we take this back, you know, let us know now. And otherwise, like I said, we'll do an update and get back with everyone.
Hey, RJ, 2 things. One thing is the pedestrian, you might call medium divides. Didn't the town just recently install those over on Tamil Vista? It's a similar concept, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, just the only difference there was we had kind of the existing medians, right? So we were able to use those aspects that were there. And so it's just a little bit of a different look and feel where we don't have that, and you know, we don't have these landscape medians. So like I said, I was envisioning more of something in the parking stall to preventing those cheaters crossing the line, but we'll take a look.
Okay, I guess if people want to get an idea of just where the crosswalk, how the crosswalk could look, Tamil Vista kind of has what you guys are thinking about, right? Just
yeah, and these ones, the splitter islands that Dave and I call them, Alicio, I think is the closest one, right? Over South Alicio, over by all of the medical offices near the Marin General.
And then the other question is, what's the next steps and what's the time frame?
So the good and the bad news is there's a sewer project coming, so that construction I think is going to calm some speeds just by being out there. Again, we're looking to implement this the following summer as part of our programmed road resurfacing and ADA project. So we do have some time. I don't think we're in a time crunch, but I would say, you know, if everyone's interested in kind of keeping the momentum, you know, we can get back with you in a few months.
Okay. When you say a few months, that'd be with going back with David's group and getting some more conceptual design about what was discussed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're happy to make we've got great feedback today. You know, I'm excited about some of these ideas and tweaking them and refining them a little bit more.
Okay.
And then to just put a little bit of extra process on that. So in a few months, David and his team and RJ will have some additional thoughts and proposals. Then we have another similar meeting like this. Then does it go to town council for approval? Like what are the next steps so we just know what we're looking at?
Yeah, so these, we're focusing, you know, David's team is focusing on the traffic calming concepts. They're using what we call line work. Once we get a concept plan, we'll then use that line work and incorporate it into our official road resurfacing plan project, where we do we look at the grades, we look at the drainage, we look at everything, and then we take it from concept level to here's what you need contractor to build this. So there really wouldn't be, I don't know if there's going to be any formal completion on his effort, other than we'll come back to you and say, hey, this is what we're recommending is formal to be included in the final design phase.
Got it. But it doesn't need to go to city council or anything like that?
So it would go to council prior to going out for bids.
Got it.
So likely a year from now is when it would go to council for official approval to approve the budget and have it advertised for bids.
Okay, so we got our man on
We've
the
already programmed the project in our budget, so that's basically the authorization to kind of pursue this.
Don't get rid of the cement guys yet.
Yeah. And also, I want to make a point that if we like the islands, we'll have to keep the crosswalks where it is, because if you move that island back so that you put a crosswalk where we're on option C, then the person on the corner will not be able to get in and out of her driveway without going over the island, which is I think, mean to her. Do you see what I'm saying? Like right now,
the complexity of the driveway.
If she backs up, she's going to miss, or goes forward, she's going to miss that island because it's not right in front of her house. But if we move the island back to put a crosswalk in, because you have to do that.
Now we'll make sure that we're not going to impede movements in and out of driveways.
But it seems like, so if we really like the idea of the islands, actually, I think either option would work. Personally, I love that the stop sign on Estrada. I think that's going to help a lot. And I think these calming, either bulging out or putting the islands, I think is going to work. So I say it's all good.
And David, whatever you guys do, you guys are making sure you don't impede neighbors' driveways or anything like that, right?
Yeah, right. We would flag that in our analysis and obviously make sure we discuss that. But yeah, if that's the case, we'll let you know as part of our update. But we're going to avoid it at all costs.
RJ and David, I just wanted to thank you for these thoughtful proposals. I just had one more thing that I wanted to reiterate that someone brought up earlier is any sort of additional traffic calming measures over by the preschool would be much appreciated, because we are down at 38. And so as you may know, by the time the cars kind of whip past that pedestrian crosswalk and everything, the speeds do tend to pick up quite a bit. So any additional measures would really be great.
Yeah, we'll look into it, definitely.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
So RJ, we'll hear back from you around tax time in April.
How about early May? Just because we have the time and we got all the other projects.
That's why I kind of set people's expectations.
Yeah.
And we got to pay our taxes and recover from that.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Really appreciate the good comments, and we'll check back in soon.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for a thoughtful presentation.